I'm Dale, Dr. Smockter. Call me Dale. I wish I had the authority to doctor everybody. We'd get over this sheepskin psychosis we have. But I appreciate the privilege. And at some point, maybe at the start of the next session, I'm going to pray for us. You prayed for me, thank you. I'm going to pray for us. I realize and respect the wisdom that is collectively in this group. And so I invite you to respond, ask a question or give an answer. When you do physical science, you can be exact. In physical science, we talk about laws, the law of gravity. In social science, we cannot be that exact. We use terms like usually, probably, but it's hard to be that exact about human behavior with one exception. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. We can be exact about that. Sinner you, sinner me, sinners we. So we can be certain that each of us will fall short of what God expects us to do and be. And so what I'll be sharing today will be gleanings over a 50-plus year ministry. Now, when I was young, like some of you, I read and studied everything I could find about pastoral leadership. And so if I could remember, I'd give attribution as we go along to those who have taught me, from whom I have learned. But it's going to be, much of it's going to be anecdotal. And again, with social science, what I learned may be different than what you are learning. And I invite you to fill in the gap, to make comments and say, well, that's not what I experienced. That's not the way people have behaved with me. And please share that. My interest is in us learning. I'm 82 years old. My reputation, for good or bad, has been made already. I'm interested in one thing, and that's the truth. That you and I can learn today, as closely as we can come, to the truth about how to be a pastoral leader, how to be a pastor. Brian mentioned that he had asked me to share about my own journey. And so I'm going to do so. And I'm going to start, and I think it's on your handout. I'm going to start with my going to Southern Seminary in 1961. 1965, I'm sorry. I graduated from college in 65, got married in the summer of 65, and went home to Southern Seminary. When I got there, Wayne Oates was one of the professors, very influential, had written several books. Rob is shaking his head. And I had learned about Wayne Oates. One reason I went to Southern. And I wanted to study under Wayne Oates. And I told Dean Thurman one day, I said, Dean, I said, I don't want to take the usual curriculum. I just want to take classes under Wayne Oates. He didn't even look at me. He just said, if you are a student here, you'll take what everybody else takes. And I did. And I fell in love with New Testament studies. In fact, my plan, not the Lord's plan, but my plan was to continue on. And I went through the process of being accepted into the PhD program. Rob has one. And my wife said, we ain't going to go to school no more. Said, we're going to get out. We've gone to school long enough. And she was right. She had discerned, and we did the Lord's will. We came out of seminary and out of the education process, and came to First Baptist Church of Montgomery. I have down here that my spiritual gift is mercy. Probably should be later in the process. But I learned over the years, my spiritual gift is mercy. And the word pastors, now the word pastor, singular, is in the King James just one time in Jeremiah. The word pastors is in Jeremiah about 7 times. Most of the time, not speaking politely about pastors. There's one verse in the New Testament in the King James that's translated as pastors. And that's Ephesians 4:11. For he calls some to be apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers. And I have the pastoral gift, the gift of mercy. I can pretty quickly and easily identify with people in their pain. And I could go into my background and you could understand some of that. But I learned that my spiritual gift is mercy. And that may not be your gift. You may struggle at being sympathetic, empathetic, merciful with folks. But you still have to be that way as much as possible. But it's easy for me to be that way because my spiritual gift is the gift of mercy. I came to First Baptist Church, Montgomery, as a pastoral intern. Now back then, that was in 1969. Back then, I know of 3 churches in Alabama that had intern programs for pastors. First Baptist Church, Montgomery, where I came. And the agreement was that I would be there for 2 years. Had to stay there 2 years. Had to commit to be there 2 years. And if I liked them and if they liked me, they might permit me to stay 1 more year. But I was only invited to stay 2 years, but I did stay a 3rd year, thankfully. I learned a whole lot by being an intern. I wish we had programs like that today. I don't know of a single church in Alabama that has an intern program today, but I learned a lot. And I say this, if it had not been for me being an intern, being able to see leadership and see organization and see how experienced pastors work, I'm not sure I could have survived in ministry. But I was very blessed to be able to observe this over that 3-year period of time. Now, Michael will remember this. In July 1971, the pastor of First Baptist Eufaula, Alabama, got up on Sunday morning to go to have breakfast with some of his friends. They did it every Sunday morning. And when he got up, in the exchange of a gun, he shot and killed his wife, Mary. As you can imagine, the church was totally fractured. 1 month later, O.B. Carter, the chair of the pastor search team, called me. I was pastoral intern at First Baptist. He called me and asked if I would be willing to talk with them. And I said no. Very quickly I said no. I knew what had happened. And I knew the church had to be in a mess. And I said no. I went home that day. I told my wife, I said, I made a big mistake today. I got a call from First Baptist Eufaula. And they asked if I would talk with them, and I said no. I said, I should not have said no. I said, if they call me again, which search teams typically do not, I said, if they call me again, I'm going to be willing to talk with them. And they did call me again, probably 3 months later. And I said, yes, I'll talk with them. And I went down there and met with them. And was too young to really understand all that it meant that their pastor had shot and killed his wife in the bedroom of the pastorium. Some thought he had done it intentionally. They did have a murder inquest, but brought no charges. Some thought he intentionally killed her. Others thought it was a total mistake. That just happened. I ended up saying that they could present me to the church as potential pastor. They did. They called me and said, you got an unanimous vote. I was too young to know and ask, was that the first vote or the second vote? Now I know that some churches, after the first vote, when it's not a unanimous, somebody will say, let's make it unanimous. But I didn't say it was it the first vote or the second. I just knew that they said I'd been called unanimously. So on my first Sunday there, I positioned myself in the place where people came from the education area, Sunday school, into the sanctuary. I positioned myself right there so I could speak to the folks. They walked right by me, didn't even look at me. I was crushed. And for the days after that, I was stiff-armed. What I learned later is they were so much in grief, they were not yet ready for another pastor. And I learned that. But I've been in ministry over 50 years. The toughest year of my 50 plus years was that first year at First Baptist Eufaula, because the folks were in deep grief. We're going to talk about grief today. How you need to be sensitive and aware of the dynamics of grief. And I thought, I can't stay here. They don't want me here. And of course, I spent a lot of time praying. I said, Lord, what am I going to do? And the Lord said, and you can anticipate what I'm going to say. The Lord said, you can't control how they treat you. You can only control how you treat them. So you love them. And so that was a great, great gift of insight from the Lord. There's wisdom in that, guys. You can't control how people treat you, but you can control how you treat them, and that is our responsibility. Treat them Jesus-like. Treat them with love. And it was 1 year, almost to the day from the time I went there, that I saw the things change and people respond. At first, they didn't respond to me. They responded to a guest speaker I had come in to do January Bible study. We planned to have it in the fellowship hall. They filled that fellowship hall. We had to move to the sanctuary for the January Bible study, and that was my first indication that things had changed. They were ready. They were ready to move on. I stayed there 8 years. And the first year of those 8 was the toughest of all my 50 plus years. The next 7, I think, were the most effective years of my ministry. Again, I'm a pastor. I have a pastor's heart. And in that small town of 10,000 people, it was easy to be the pastor. By that I mean I could go at lunch. I could walk around 2 blocks and pastor 15 folks. And so that was just what I wanted to be and do. So I was there 8 years. Good years. And J.R. White, who was pastor of First Baptist Montgomery for 23 years, great leader. I learned so much from him by observation. He didn't have a jealous bone in his body. It was all grace and love. I could tell you some stories. don't think I should. But I learned so much from him. But he retired after 23 years. And the pastor search team initially said they would not consider any of the interns who had been in that role at First Baptist. There had been several interns. I was the second. There were probably 4 or 5 after me. They said they would not consider any of the interns. I heard that, so I knew I wouldn't be considered. But about 6, 7 months after that, maybe a little longer, they did call me. They had changed their mind. They did call me to see if I would be willing to talk with them. And I loved that church. I still love that church. And I said yes. And in the conversation, we had more than one conversation. They asked if they could present me to the church as pastor. After one of the meetings, and I tell this, and it's a joke that you probably have told about your wife. I went home and I said, Linnell, my wife's name. I said, Linnell, they asked if they could present me to the church. She said, what did you say? I said, I'll pray about it. She said, you pray and I'll pack. She was ready to come back to First Baptist Montgomery. And I stayed there 11 years. Now I'm going to tell you a story. It's to be reflected on the providence of God. In my 10th year, halfway through my 10th year, on Sunday morning, I went into my study there at the house. And always got up a little earlier on Sunday morning and went over my sermon. We had an 8:30 service and 11 o'clock service. And that morning I was heartbroken and I started crying. And I said, Lord, give me a new vision or a new place of ministry. And that very morning, at the end of the 11 o'clock service, that very morning, Troy Morrison, who had just become the exec of the Alabama Baptist Convention, waited until everybody had left. And he said, Pastor, would you be willing to talk to me about becoming a state missionary, part of the State Board of Missions staff? And even though it was so obvious to me, having prayed what I did just a few hours earlier, the Lord had just quickly opened the door. Usually I have to seek, but not that day. And I said, well, I'm going to have to pray about it. He said, well, how long will it take you before you might have an answer? I said, a month. He said, okay. I had just led the church into a massive renovation project. And I've always felt, as a pastor, if you lead a church into a big project, don't leave them. Don't leave them with a big debt. Stay there until something's completed. And after a month, I told him, I said, yes, I'd be willing to come to the state board if that's the Lord's will. I felt it was. And I said, but Troy, I can't leave in the middle of this renovation project. I said, I've led the people into this. I've got to stay until it's done. He said, how long would that be? I said, another 5 months. He shook his head. He didn't want to hear that. But he got an interim to come into that position, that role, for that period of time. So in January of 1991, that's one thing I left off of this. I shouldn't have. So it's because it's very significant. In January of 1991, I came to the state board and was in the role of what was then called church minister relations. I wasn't here long before Rick Lance became the exec. Troy Morrison retired. And one indication of power. People in power have the capacity to name things. Just like you heard Mike Jackson call this the facility. That's a Rick Lance determination. You don't call it building. For my 25 years, it was called building. But now it's called facility. Sounds like a bathroom. But Mike had learned, I bet Ken and Rob know, what do you call it?
Dr. Lance is around facility.
One indication of power is people in power have the capacity to name things. And so Rick Lance calls this the facility, so everybody who works here calls this the facility. I'm an old hand, I call it building, so I still do, even in front of him. He doesn't correct me, he accepts it. But Rick Lance called me one day after he had become exec. He said, I think your office should be called Leader Care. I said, oh, that's a wonderful name. What do you call that body of water that's south of Florida? What do you call it? Gulf of America. Someone in power decided to change that name. And people now stutter, and they don't call it either Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America, they just call it the Gulf. That's their way of getting around it. But I became the director of the Office of Leader Care. I was in that position for 25 years. Brian mentioned that a part of that role was conflict mediation. Now that was not a pleasant part of it. Conflict is very hurtful, and I've driven home at night with a broken heart because of the way people in conflict can behave. People who are the people of God. Right. And then after I retired at the end of 25 years, I continued on in what they, I guess, call contract role. And I quit that December the 31st of 2025. And, but I, from the beginning of my time here, the first church I became the interim pastor of was East Memorial Baptist Church. It's now relocated right over here. And their pastor called me. I wasn't sure I wanted to do it interim because I was so busy here. But the pastor of that church called me and said, asked if I could preach for him 5 Sundays in August while he was in the hospital having heart surgery. He never got out of intensive care. And I couldn't do all 5 Sundays. I did 3 of them, I think. And the Sunday I went there, he was in intensive care near death. And during the Sunday school hour, he died. And we called all the folks, all the adults rather, into the sanctuary and told them I had a prayer together. And so that was my first interim. But I've done 21. The last one is Pentala Baptist Church. And Michael mentioned the former pastor there, Gary Burton, who was there 52 years as pastor. And that's an interesting trip to go in after. I've never gone in. I've gone in 2 or 3 churches after a former pastor had been there 20-something years, but not 52 years. And some of them very directly said to me, Gary Burton will always be my pastor. And I understand that. He should be. He invested his life in them. But people have a heart big enough to accept another pastor. That takes them a while to get to the place where they're ready to. But they've been a little over a year now. I stayed with them a year and had to leave before they called a new pastor. But that was my last interim. Let's see if I have anything else down here. I think not. And we've got just about 10 minutes. I want you to look at the diagram. Pastoral leadership has 3 aspects or dimensions to it. Preaching, teaching, pastoral care, and administration. They're interlocking. Not one is expendable. You may think you're so good in one that you don't have to do another one. That's wrong. You're expected to do all three. Let me give you an example. Under administration, most of us, including me, that was always my number 3. That was my weakness. It's the weakness of your weakness that will get you in trouble. My strength was pastoral care. So I grade me a B plus in pastoral care. I grade me a B in preaching. I grade me a C in administration. Now I realize that if the churches I served, and I pastored 3 churches for 24 years, I realized that if in the churches I served, if they had to grade me, they wouldn't grade me as high as I grade myself. They'd grade me a little lower than that. But grading myself, my strength, pastoral care, B plus, preaching, teaching, solid B, administration C. The thing that enabled me to stay at churches, I never was in any real trouble in a church. The thing that enabled me to stay at churches and be halfway effective was I was fairly well balanced. It's the weakness of your weakness that gets you in trouble. So what I focused on, because pastoral care was so natural for me, was gifted. I focused on being the best pastor I could. I learned everything I could about pastoral care. And then because administration was my weakness, I read everything I could find on administration. And there are not a lot of good things out there. I went to conferences. There aren't many conferences on administration. But I did everything I could to pull up my weakness, which was administration. Okay, I want you to rank yourself, 1, 2, 3. 1 being your strength, 2 being your number 2 in terms of strength, 3 being your weakness. Whatever you rank them, whatever you are, rank them 1, 2, 3. Can't have 2 1s. Nor 2 3s. 1, 2, 3.
What if there's some of these you just don't care about? I mean, we gotta do it, but I mean, some, like administration, you can do it, you're effective, but you pretty much don't care.
Well, but you still have to do it,
You
and
still
that's
have
my
to do it.
point. You're expected to do it. There are 3 functions or 3 roles, responsibilities under pastoral leadership.
Yeah.
And whether you care about it or not, you're expected to do it. If you don't care about it, it's probably your weakness.
Yeah, no question.
Yes, sir.
How would you define administration? Just so we're all talking about the same.
Making sure that things are done decently and in order. Anything that is not working well, you're going to be responsible to get it fixed. Let me give you an example. When I was at First Baptist Montgomery, we had a period of time when we had trouble with the sound system. Just about every Sunday for 2 months, at some point during the service, there'd be this squeal. You've heard them. And it wakes everybody up. That's the only good thing about it. But we had a squeal. And people tolerated it, almost laughed the first Sunday or 2. Then they quit laughing. And they said to me, "You got to do something about this sound system." They didn't say your preaching was good this morning or your preaching was bad this morning. They focused on what was going wrong. And if they're irritated by a sound system that's not working well, then I don't care how well you preach, they're going to think about that terrible sound system. That's an example. Am I being halfway right? And I'll give you another example. We lost a finance secretary at First Baptist Montgomery. She'd been there a long time, did a great job, and we lost her. Boy, that was tough. We got another one after long search. And she went to lunch one day and called back, and she said, I'm not coming back to work. She said, I had lunch with my former husband, and we're getting married again, and I'm leaving. And she didn't come back. And so we started a search again. It was tough finding somebody for us. And one Wednesday night after prayer meeting, 5 guys, heavy hitters in the church, heavy hitters. 5 guys came into my office, and they didn't smile. They were good friends. I loved them. And they said they loved me. But they said, we got to do something about this finance situation. And they were serious. That's an example. Here, they didn't say, Dale, you're a good preacher. Dale, you're a wonderful pastor. They said, Dale, you got to get something done about this finance secretary. And that's an example of how whatever needs to be done, they look to you as pastor to get it done. How many of you rank preaching, teaching as number 1? And most of our churches, see, we used to call search teams, we used to call them pulpit committees. Why? Because the focus was on the pulpit. And it really still is. But now we've changed, what do we call them now? Pastor search team. Because we've realized it's more than preaching, more than a pulpit. It's managing the whole scene. And a whole lot of people. So, how many of you put pastoral care as your number 1? Oh, good. About the same. Now, in the latest issue of Preaching Magazine, which I hope you subscribe to, William Williman, Methodist, he's a professor at Duke Divinity School. William Williman has in there an article about preaching as your main task. And who am I to disagree with William Williman? Goodness, I can't. But let me tell you, I don't care how good you are as a preacher. If you don't combine it with good pastoral care, somebody eventually will say, I used to love to hear him preach until he didn't call me when Mama died. They all go together. They're interlocking. You got to do them all. Realize that. Don't think you're so good with one you can let another one go. You're wrong. They expect you, now it may not be in your job description, but they expect you to take care of whatever needs to be taken care of so that that church can run decently and orderly. Am I right or wrong? Right. And if I'm wrong, tell me, goodness. I'm only interested in us learning the truth. Okay. It's right at break time. And so you've tolerated one of these sessions already, one down and some more to go. Any questions or answers? I'm as interested in answers as I am questions. Any questions or answers about what we've covered thus far?
I was greeting people Sunday morning right before the service, and a lady, the pastor, the restroom is out of towels.
Yeah. If you didn't hear what Mike said that he was greeting folks on Sunday morning, and one person came up to him and said, the restroom is out of towels. I know it. I had a woman come up to me at First Baptist Montgomery. I was shaking folks out after the service. And she said, there was chewing gum under my chair in the Sunday school class. Now, you know. Yes, sir.
So this is I don't know if you guys experience this, but I've been at a couple churches where the same group of people, or one person or two, at invitation time, they're the first ones up there, and they list all their things.
Yeah,
And it seems like they take all the time right there, and it feels like nobody else wants to come down to the altar because they're all right
Yeah.
there.
yeah.
How do you deal with that? This Sunday it happened, and I just said, hey, I'm gonna bring you over here to this pastor and let this pastor pray for you. I was like, you got it, bud. But it was one of those things where, and then afterwards I said, I hated to throw you off. I wasn't trying to do that, but I need to leave space for other people to come.
Yeah.
Was that the right?
No, I think, what do y'all think? Was that a right, reasonable, wise thing to do? To hand that person off? I had a person like that in one church I served. Every Sunday she was right there. And it was an emotional issue, not a spiritual issue. And what you did not dismiss her. You did not rebuke her. You treated her kindly, but let somebody else handle it so you would be there to handle anybody else. Am I getting it right, what you shared?
Yes, sir.
Yes, well, that's wonderful. And pray for that kind of wisdom to know how to handle things. Because you're gonna have emotionally ill people in your congregation. They are drawn to the church because the church may be the only place that treats them with any kind of decency. Okay, it's break time. Take a break,